13 creepiest mysteries solved by journalists covering the story. Every writer is looking for the one story that can make their career. While investigating even the smallest mystery, they dig up and devour facts that can hopefully lead to a greater understanding of calamitous and horrifying events. Some stories take years to get to the bottom of, and a few of the journalists who solved crimes on this list spent most of their lives following one story in order to find a somewhat satisfying conclusion. Most of the stories that are covered here don't have a happy ending, but with the help of the journalists involved, the families of the people involved were able to find closure in a horrible situation. This is an understatement, but crime investigation isn't easy. No one wants to share information. You never know who's telling the truth, and it takes forever to get anything done. People can spend their entire lives trying to solve one case, and more often than not they end up with unsatisfying results, and 30 years worth of court transcripts in their garage. However, when a journalist is able to find a definitive answer to a mystery, local, worldwide, or otherwise, it's inspiring to all the other writers out there who are looking for their big break. Put on your deerstalker, get out the Smith Corona, and get ready to go down a rabbit hole of unsolved mysteries that were unraveled by journalists following the story. 1. The Grim Sleeper. In 2006, Christine Polisk began trying to find consistencies between 38 suspicious deaths of women dating back to the 1980s. All of the victims were black, and most of them had been dumped in alleys or dumpsters. Christine and her editor at LA Weekly quickly began to connect the dots and realized that most of the murders on her list were likely perpetrated by the same criminal, the Grim Sleeper. Despite taking 14 off years between his crimes, the Sleeper's MO was still eerily similar. After interviewing hundreds of women across South Los Angeles, Polisk was able to help the LAPD apprehend Lonnie David Franklin Jr., who was charged with 10 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. The dark streets of downtown LA made the perfect hunting ground for a serial killer known as the Grim Sleeper. He was targeting vulnerable people and getting away with it. His first victim was cocktail waitress Deborah Jackson, 29. She disappeared after taking a bus home from visiting a friend. Her body was found 3 days later, dumped in an alleyway under an old carpet. She'd been shot 3 times in the chest. It was August 1985 and, at the time, the city of LA was struggling to cope with an epidemic of crime and drug addiction. Senseless killings were common and remained unsolved, especially if the victim was like Deborah. She was from a deprived area and had drugs in her system. People with that kind of background weren't a priority for an already overstretched police force, and the Grim Sleeper took full advantage. It would take years before anyone realized that Deborah was the first victim of the most prolific serial killer California has ever seen, and 3 decades before he was caught and sentenced to death. Lonnie Franklin Jr. picked victims that society had forgotten about and stalked the streets at his leisure. He was eventually convicted of murdering 10 women, but a disturbing collection of photos means the case is far from closed. Just how many more women did he kill? The 1980s was a chaotic time in South LA. Crack cocaine addiction was high and crime was rife. After Deborah's murder, more bodies were found dumped in alleyways, wrapped in old carpet, or stuffed in trash bags, either partially dressed or naked. None had ID, but they'd all been choked or shot and sexually assaulted. Soon after Deborah came Henrietta Wright, 35. She'd been shot twice and left in an alleyway under a mattress. In January 1987, Barbara Ware, 23, was shot in the chest and dumped under a pile of rubbish. In April, Bernita Sparks, 26, went to the shops and never came back. She was dumped in a bin after being strangled, beaten and shot. Then the winter saw Mary Lowe, 26, killed on her way to a party. In January 1988, Lacrica Jefferson, 22, was found dead with a napkin over her face, with the word AIDS written on it. Alicia Alexander, 18, was killed on her way to the shops. All the victims were African American, and from poor backgrounds. Some were prostitutes with addictions, while others were simply women out late at night, which made them easy targets. Many were labeled as Jane Doe in the morgue, and the cases ran cold. Police deny they overlooked the victims, and insist they had too many cases to handle, and lacked today's technology. It took years before the murders were even linked, and, by then, the Grim Sleeper was well into his stride. His name was Lonnie David Franklin Jr., and he was a city trash collector. The married dad of two had even worked as a garage attendant for the LA Police Department for a while. Neighbors say he was friendly and always happy to help out. When he offered his victims a lift, they'd have been grateful. In November 1988, Anitra Washington climbed into a car with Lonnie. He shot her in the chest, raped her and pushed her out of the car. Incredibly, she survived. Police knew they had a serial killer on their hands, but, from 1988, there appeared to be no more victims for almost 14 years, which is what earned Lonnie the nickname the Grim Sleeper. Police thought he might have been spooked by Anitra surviving, while others think Lonnie never really stopped at all. In March 2002, the body of 14-year-old Princess Bertilux was found. DNA matched the previous victims and the Grim Sleeper was officially awake. Valerie McCorvey, 35, was found dead in July 2003, and in 2007 Jane Peters, 25, was shot in the back and thrown in a dumpster. By now, police had the technology they needed to link the victims with DNA evidence. A task force was created and the public were finally made aware of the serial killer's reign over the city. There was outrage. How many lives could have been saved if the public had known? A breakthrough came in 2010. DNA from the crime scenes was linked, with DNA on the system. It belonged to Lonnie's son, who was on record for weapon charges. All the bodies were found in a 5-mile radius of Lonnie's home. They just needed his DNA. Investigators found out Lonnie was attending a party at a pizza restaurant. An undercover officer acted as a waiter and collected Lonnie's leftover pizza crust and the cutlery he used. His DNA was a match. In July 2010, Lonnie, then 57, was arrested. His wife Sylvia stood by him. 2. The disappearance of Duncan MacPherson. Duncan MacPherson was a Canadian semi-pro hockey player who, in 1989, stopped off for some extreme sports in Vienna, before heading to his intended destination in Scotland. MacPherson vanished from the ski resort in Vienna, and although his death was surrounded by mysterious circumstances, it was never investigated. The MacPherson family kept searching, but their search was futile, too. They'd eventually spend their life savings traveling to the Alps 9 separate times, even hiring private investigators, all in an attempt to find Duncan. No luck. In July 2003, another employee at the resort discovered a glove sticking out of a melting glacier. Authorities were called to the scene and discovered a mostly intact set of human remains. A wallet, found in the body's jacket, revealed it was Duncan MacPherson. He was 23. That's what we know. There's a staggering amount of information we don't know, and many discrepancies with the story. During the police investigation, the resort claimed his snowboard Duncan had been using was returned. That was wrong. His snowboard was found, still strapped to his body and broken in two, in 2003. The resort holds the official position that MacPherson wandered off trail, fell into a crevasse, and died there. In 2003, Duncan's body was found directly in the middle of a ski slope. In addition, Duncan's body had been subject to tremendous violence. His corpse showed signs of massive injuries. His left femur was smashed, and his leg and forearm were totally severed. Several other bones were also broken. The injuries were not consistent with the crevasse story. There are several theories about how these occurred. It's likely that Duncan's body was run over and processed by a snow grooming truck, similar to this one. An Austrian pathologist assigned to the case added the theory that Duncan's injuries were caused by movement of ice, snow, and sediment over the 14 years he was buried. In a report by CBC's The Fifth Estate, a Canadian forensic pathologist said that both a violent fall and an encounter with machinery could have led to the injuries. The most likely case is that Duncan either fell down a crevasse, had a heavy crash, or was buried by sudden snow movement. His lack of experience on the slopes and the bad conditions that day likely played a role. Duncan was badly injured, breaking his femur, an injury that requires immediate medical attention and causes heavy blood loss. Duncan either died from his initial injuries, or was alive and left on the slope, all alone and gravely injured. After the crash, Duncan, or his dead body, was run over by a snow grooming truck. His left leg and arm were severed after getting caught in the machine. According to an independent pathologist, damage to the snowboard found near Duncan's body, as well as damage done to Duncan's body itself, are both consistent with that theory. The body was buried underneath the snow, and laid there for 14 years. It's now commonly thought that, in order to protect the resort from bad publicity, local police conspired with the resort to keep the story quiet. Pesut's car taking 6 weeks to be found, and the mystery of the vanishing snowboard, both help this idea. Austrian authorities also never did an autopsy on Duncan. There never will be one, either. Duncan was cremated, at his parents' request. Duncan's family has not given up on trying to find out the truth behind their son's death. They've put together an application to the European Court of Human Rights to reopen Duncan's case, and have reached out to media frequently since their son first went missing. The bottom line is this: Duncan MacPherson is dead. He died on a ski slope in Austria. The investigation into the case was sloppy, perhaps by accident, perhaps intentionally. And now, decades after his death, there are still unanswered questions surrounding his death. Three. Who owns man seated with a cane? This mystery has everything: a strange painting, Nazis, art thieves, the French government, and Canadians. The CBC's The Fifth Estate investigative team went down the art world rabbit hole when they began tracing the lineage of man seated with a cane, a contentious Armando Modigliani painting that was sold to a mysterious American in Nazi-occupied France in 1944 for 25,000 francs. Why is this important? Well, the family of Oskar Stettiner, a Jewish antique dealer, claim his shop was raided by Nazis, and all of his wares were taken and sold at auction. But the records of what was taken from him are incomplete, stating only that one Modigliani painting was looted. There are no official records of what it depicted. But the Stettiner family believes it's man seated with a cane, and the team of reporters from the CBC combed through over 60 years of half-truths from art dealers that never existed, which led them to a group of sisters, and the final piece of the puzzle: the man who bought Stettiner's Modigliani at auction in 1944 was related to the man who auctioned man seated with a cane in 1996. The Fifth Estate makes a nearly bulletproof case that Stettiner's Modigliani was man seated with a cane, and because it was seized illegally from him in 1944, it rightfully belongs to his family. 4. Journalist spends 31 years on one case. Larry Welburn spent 31 years reporting on the unsolved murder of Linda Cummings. In 1974, Cummings was found hanged naked in her apartment, and despite conflicting information and reports of a suspicious building manager, police ruled her death a suicide. 6 months later, the building manager was convicted of murdering another tenant in the same building, and despite this evidence, her cause of death was never re-examined. Over the course of the next 3 decades, Welburn conducted more than 60 interviews, and finally published the 8-part series detailing his life's work in 2005. In the end, the building manager was arrested and charged in relation to her death. The official cause of death in 1974 after they found Linda Louise Cummings hanging by a rope in her Santa Ana apartment was suicide. On Thursday, more than 31 years later, authorities are calling it murder. David L. Stanley, 61, a neighborhood watch organizer and hospice volunteer, was arrested on suspicion of murder at his home, in a golf course community near Las Vegas. Stanley was known as Louis Y. Checky when he was manager at the Aladdin Apartments, where Cummings died. He was the last person to see Cummings alive and the man who found her nude body hanging in the bedroom of apartment 8 on January 24, 1974. Nearly 40 officers, including a dozen from the Orange County District Attorney's Office and the Santa Ana Police Department, staked out Stanley's home beginning at 7 a.m. Thursday. He was arrested shortly after 8 a.m. and led from his house in white plastic handcuffs. When Stanley was brought out of his home, his neighbors on Peoria Avenue gathered and stared. They said they were shocked, disturbed and in disbelief that a man they considered their close friend was being arrested for a crime allegedly committed 3 decades earlier. In a phone interview from her home in Florida, Colette Broadway, Cummings' stepsister, said she was shocked and surprised that someone was finally arrested. "My sister deserves justice," Broadway said. "My sister deserves to have people know that she did not commit suicide. She would not have done that. No one listened to us back in 1974. She was a quiet girl who wasn't rich, and it wasn't important to anyone." 5. Ohio reporter helps convict over 100 rapists. In 2010, Rachel Dissel was one of 2 reporters who uncovered and began writing about a series of neglected rape kits at the Cleveland Police Department. According to the Cuyahoga County prosecutor, who created a task force to oversee the rape kits, Dissel is to thank for solving hundreds of backlogged rape cases that would have otherwise gone uninvestigated. On a recent Tuesday morning, members of the DNA Cold Case Task Force in Cleveland, Ohio, gathered for their weekly meeting. The conference room filled with detectives, prosecutors, a crime analyst, several victim advocates, and 1 journalist. Rachel Dissel is a reporter for The Plain Dealer, one of 2 who first uncovered and wrote about neglected rape kits at the Cleveland Police Department in 2010. Dissel has been covering the ongoing story ever since. The meeting started as it usually does with all hands on deck cases, the ones running up against the statute of limitations, then moved to other open investigations. Cleveland is not the first city to tackle a rape kit backlog, but it is one of the only municipalities to investigate every case so doggedly. Since 2011, when the city began sending rape kits to the state's crime lab, almost all of its 4,000 kits have been tested. Of these, over 1,600 contained usable DNA. 350 cases have led to grand jury indictments, and as of this month, over 100 rapists have been convicted, some of multiple rapes. Timothy McGinty, the Cuyahoga County prosecutor who created and oversees the Rape Kit Task Force, attributed its existence to Dissel and her former reporting partner, Layla Odyssey. "Rachel and her partner started this," McGinty told CJR. "They are really the reason we are where we are. It's an exemplary instance of local reporting, responsive government officials, and public support coming together to make a community safer." Bruce Shapiro, executive director of the Dart Center for Journalism and Trauma, calls Dissel's work an unusually positive use of investigative reporting. Dissel first began asking questions about rape kits in late 2009, when Ohio was rocked by the gruesome story of 11 bodies found in and around the Cleveland home of Anthony Sowell, a convicted rapist. The story prompted Dissel and Odyssey to investigate how sexual assault cases were handled in Cuyahoga County, which includes Cleveland. They filed a public records request, asking for the number of untested rape kits in storage at the Cleveland Police Department. The answer they got, "We don't know." But the department promised to find out. Dissel and Odyssey stayed on it until they received an estimate of roughly 4,000 untested kits. Once the backlog was made public, things moved steadily forward. Ohio Attorney General Michael DeWine declared that every kit would be tested at the state's crime lab, secured funding, and increased the lab staff to meet demand. 5 years after she began, Distel still writes several stories a week on some aspect of the rape kit story. She credits her editors for allowing her to stick with it. Odyssey has since moved to the City Hall beat for the Northeast Ohio Media Group, the Plain Dealer's digital counterpart. Shapiro praised Distel's intrepidness and compassion, her skill in demanding accountability from law enforcement, while telling victims' stories sensitively, in driving the story forward instead of finger-wagging. For Distel, it's about the survivors. It just makes you catch your breath, how much it's impacting people's lives. One of Acevedo's daughters thanked Distel in an email after her father was convicted. She wrote that she had previously reported her father's crimes, but the investigation had never gone anywhere. If not for Distel's reporting, the daughter wrote, her father would never have been held accountable. 6. The disappearance of Madalyn Murray O'Hair. Madalyn Murray O'Hair was the founder of American Atheists, and in 1995 she disappeared from Austin, Texas, along with her son, John, and granddaughter, Robin. Initially, people believed that O'Hair and her family had skipped town with $600,000 thanks to a typed note attached to the door of American Atheists that stated, "The Murray O'Hair family has been called out of town on an emergency basis. We do not know how long we will be gone." At the time of the writing of this memo, it wasn't until 1996 that an enterprising private investigator, Tim Young, joins forces with reporter John McCormack from the San Antonio Express-News to investigate a story titled, "Whatever Happened to the O'Hairs?" Tim Young is a smart, ambitious pie and wants to crack a high-profile case to build as his resume. At the same time, Ed Martin, a special investigator for the IRS, is also looking hard at financial irregularities at American Atheists. Both men have little idea that the series of crimes they are about to uncover will play out like a mystery novel. It doesn't take long for Tim Young and John McCormack to zero in on the 48-year-old office manager at American Atheists, David Waters. Waters is a smooth-talking ex-convict that O'Hair had hired to run operations in Austin. But when O'Hair caught Waters embezzling funds, she had him arrested. When Waters gets off the hook with just probation, O'Hair became irate and vindictive, blasting him in her atheist newsletter, exposing his sordid, criminal past. O'Hair's public humiliation of Waters hit a nerve. Tim Young and John McCormack were about to find out how hard. When Madalyn O'Hair disappeared with her son John and her daughter Robin, it was David Waters who ran to the press loudly claiming that they had fled the country with millions of atheist dollars. His evidence was compelling and colorful enough for Vanity Fair to feature him in an article. But Tim Young and John McCormack had a hunch that Waters was lying and that he had the motive and criminal background for something truly sinister. Investigating Waters' phone records, Young and McCormack discovered that in the spring and summer of 1995, Waters made numerous calls to two men named Danny Fry and Gary Carr. Both men are ex-cons who Waters befriended in prison. The men then learned something else very curious by talking to Danny Fry's girlfriend. She tells him that Danny had traveled to Texas to help David Waters with the scheme and that she had not heard from Danny for over a year. McCormack and Young are surprised to learn that Danny Fry disappeared the same week as Madalyn O'Hair. The puzzle becomes clearer still when Tim Young finds a rare coin dealer in town who reveals that John O'Hair had come into his shop and nervously purchased $600,000 worth of gold coins. By this time, Tim Young is hardly surprised to discover that a week after the O'Hairs disappear, David Waters and Gary Carr go on a spending spree paying cash for Cadillacs and fancy clothes. But it was a small item in the Dallas, Texas police blotter that would give McCormack and Young the evidence they needed to close the case. A corpse, minus crudely amputated head and hands, had been found on a trash-strewn bank of the Trinity River near Dallas in October of 1995. McCormack alerts the Dallas PD that he has a hunch of who this could be. DNA test confirms it. The headless corpse is Danny Fry. When Danny Fry's brother learns that his brother has been murdered, he calls Tim Young and confesses what he knows. Danny had traveled to Texas to help kidnap and guard the O'Hares at a motel while Danny Waters extorted money from them. Tim Young and John McCormack go to the authorities. David Waters and Gary Carr are arrested. Although police can't pin murders on either man, both ex-cons are found with guns, a serious violation of their parole. In exchange for a lesser sentence, Gary Carr confesses to the kidnapping scheme, but claims to only have been a guard. David Waters, facing hard time in Texas State Prison, confesses to murdering Danny Fry and the O'Hares. He tells them how all three were strangled, rolled up in bed sheets and loaded into a cargo van. They were dismembered with a large knife, and then stuffed into 55-gallon drums. Waters would then show police where the bodies were buried. Police video shows a multi-agency task force digging up field on a ranch near Camp Wood, Texas, and discovering human bones, including the metal hip joint that belonged to Madalyn Murray O'Hare. Many questions still remain. Why hadn't John O'Hare, who was buying gold coins and taking out cash advances while his mother and sister were being held hostage, asked for help? Many of the answers may be known only to David Waters, who died of cancer in federal prison. After the discovery of a torso in Dallas that belonged to one of David Waters' friends, McCormack published an article in the Dallas Observer that was able to kick the FBI into gear and get them to make arrests in the murder of O'Hare and her family. 7. Killer calls journalist to confess crime. On the fateful day of March 16, 1982, Caroline Tusignan from Milwaukee received a call from the Kosciuszko Middle School that her 13-year-old daughter had been suspended. Instead of going to the school, Caroline decided to let her daughter Carrie Ann Jopek take the one-block walk home. After that, Caroline kept waiting for her daughter, but she never came, as the investigation into her disappearance did not produce any results as well. 17 months later, in August 1983, Jopek's dead body was discovered when a contractor working on the back porch of a neighboring house hit a skeleton. The murder had remained an elusive mystery ever since. 33 years later, on October 11, 2015, a journalist working for WISN 12 News received a call out of the blue, as the man on the other side confessed to murdering Jopek. 50-year-old Jose Ferreira told the reporter that he had not only murdered Carrie Ann, but had also raped the dying teen. The disturbing story, which shocked the reporter and the town, brought closure for Caroline Tusignan, who had been blaming herself for Jopek's death. She said, "It's been 33 years since she's been gone. She spent 2 of her birthdays underneath that porch." Caroline was suspicious of Ferreira, who was known as Junior back then, and lived in the neighborhood. He had told her that Jopek, him and some friends were drinking and smoking weed when she hit her head and died, but refused to narrate the same to authorities. He told Carolyn that they panicked and buried her under the porch, although it is unclear if Carolyn ever told this to the police. Ferreira, who kept telling Carolyn that Jopek was haunting him, confessed that during the party at a friend's place, they went in the basement to make out, but he pushed Jopek down the stairs when she changed her mind. Jopek broke her neck, as her last words were, "I don't know if this is a good idea." After this, Ferreira raped her thinking she was unconscious, but buried her upon realizing that she was dead. Although the murderer escaped investigations into his sickening act, it seems he was not able to escape his conscience, which ultimately caught up with him. 8. What happened to the Death Valley Germans? In 2009, skeletal remains were discovered in Death Valley. Authorities believe that the bones belonged to the mother of a family of German tourists who disappeared in 1996. A large search and rescue operation in 1996 found no trace of them, but it was assumed they had become stranded in the desert and succumbed to heat stroke. 13 years later, police were satisfied enough after finding just the one body, but Tom Mahood, a civil engineer and part-time sleuth from Orange, California, was determined to find the father and 2 children. What Mahood discovered was an almost systematic incompetence on the part of the U.S. military, as well as local and state police departments. Mahood goes all in on solving the mystery of the Death Valley Germans by studying the seasonal changes of the desert, interviewing retired professors, and eventually recreating their fatal trip to try and understand what happened to this unlucky group of tourists. He did find more remains, and formulated an idea about how they became stranded in the first place, but there is no satisfying ending to this story. By the time Mahood's investigation was over, the police were still dragging their feet on identifying the bones. They have never publicly confirmed that the remains Mahood found belonged to the German family. 9. Who watches the Watcher House? The story of the Watcher House of Westfield, NJ, has been a constant source or intrigue since 2015, when a family abandoned their suburban home after receiving spooky letters from a mysterious person calling themselves the Watcher. Part of one of the letters read, "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Have you found all the secrets it holds? Will the young bloods play in the basement? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I will know as soon as you move in." Spooky, right? Gothamist writer Lauren Evans visited Westfield a month after the letters began arriving to see what all the fuss was about, and found a town full of people exhausted with rubberneckers. One of the officers she spoke to seemed pretty nonchalant about the case. "People ask me about it all the time. Even when I'm off duty, at parties," he said. "I tell them the only thing to watch is me drink another beer." Evans interviewed Horace Corbin, the editor of a local paper, who made a strong case for the Watcher being a hoax made up by the family who lived in the house because they couldn't afford their mortgage payments. "We won't know for sure if that's true until someone else moves in, but it seems pretty likely at this point." 10. Did the KKK kill Frank Morris? Frank Morris was asleep in the back bedroom of his shoe repair shop when the sound of breaking glass woke him. In the dark of early morning, he walked into his shop and could see two white men standing outside. One was pouring gasoline around the base of his shop and breaking windows. As Morris moved toward the front door, he saw the other man pointing a single-barrel shotgun at him. "Get back in there, nigger," the man with the shotgun barked. Morris saw the man with the gasoline can light a match and throw it inside Morris' shop, which the men had soaked on the inside before Morris awakened, became an instant inferno. As he tried to run outside, the man with the gun repeated, "Get back in, nigger." On that morning of December 10, 1964 in Faraday, Louisiana, Morris was about to become one of scores of unsolved race murders in the South from the civil rights years. He was 51 years old, gregarious, and known for being a fine craftsman. His business catered to black and white customers, and many people of both races claimed him as a friend. He had steered clear of civil rights activity. Among blacks, he was respected because he ran a good business, gave their sons jobs, and taught them how to work hard and treat people well. White customers, including women, felt comfortable enough to wait inside for their shoe repairs, banter with Morris, and allow their children behind the counter so Morris could show them how to cut leather. In 1964, that breach of the racial barrier may have been sufficient reason for the Ku Klux Klan to act against Morris. That year, just as Freedom Summer was bringing hundreds of young people to push for civil rights in Mississippi, the Klan had announced an offensive in retaliation, and 3 civil rights workers had been killed in Philadelphia, Mississippi. The Faraday-Vidalia area of eastern Louisiana, and the Natchez area just across the Mississippi River, had several high-active Ku Klux Klan organizations at the time. An ongoing federal investigation into the Klan and political corruption in the area had shown that the tentacles of both reached deeply into law enforcement there. Inside his shop that morning, Morris was quickly engulfed in flames. He ran to a back room, through a back door and toward a service station next door. He was on fire as he ran. 2 police officers who were near the scene took him to a hospital. 2 nurses who knew him, he was unrecognizable. One of his closest friends, 94-year-old Reverend Robert Lee Jr., visited Morris and recalled to Concordia Sentinel editor Stanley Nelson in 2008, only the bottom of his feet weren't burned. He was horrible to look at. Morris survived for 4 days in the local hospital. Friends, FBI agents, pastors and family visited. One by one, they tried to get Morris to identify his assailants. One by one, several would tell Nelson years later, they left believing Morris was holding back his attacker's identity, out of fear that he or his family would suffer retaliation. Decades after a devastating 1964 fire killed Frank Morris, who was black, in Faraday, L.A., Stanley Nelson, the editor of the Concordia Sentinel and a member of the Civil Rights Cold Case Project, thinks he's figured out who was responsible for the arson. Morris's shoe shop was purposefully set ablaze while he was inside, and he died from injuries sustained in the fire 4 days later. After interviewing several members of the community, Nelson believes that the crime was perpetrated by a member of the Ku Klux Klan's wrecking crew, Arthur Leonard Spencer. After he published a story outlining the allegations, the Department of Justice and the FBI began an ongoing investigation into Spencer's part in the crime. 11. A murder in Kenosha. A jury in Kenosha Tuesday morning convicted David Wilson, 52, of second-degree murder in the death of his 4-year-old stepson 17 years and 20 days ago. The verdict came after 6.5 hours of deliberations, in the oldest criminal case ever tried in Wisconsin. Wilson, of rural Kenosha, showed no emotion as the verdict was returned before Judge Gerald Breitenbach of Kenosha County Circuit Court. But 4 sisters of the boy who died, Donald Miller, broke into tears as the verdict was read by the judge. "This day is for Donnie," said Joan Flatley, 23, a sister of Donald. Donnie finally had his day. The boy died on January 8, 1969, in Kenosha Hospital after what state prosecutors contended was a protracted period of child abuse by Wilson, his stepfather. During the week-long trial, Richard Ginkowski, a special Kenosha County prosecutor, contended that Donald died as a result of peritonitis, after being punched or kicked by Wilson the day before his death. Ginkowski said he was relieved that the jury found Wilson guilty. "I'm gratified that the jury was able to understand the nature of child abuse," he said. "Finally, the family of Donnie Miller has been vindicated and someone has said to them, after 17 years, we believe you." Donald Miller's mother, Darlene Miller, died of cancer in 1973 at the age of 33. She and Donald are buried next to each other in St. George Cemetery in Kenosha. The day of Mrs. Miller's death in 1973, Wilson was arrested for having sexual intercourse with a child. He subsequently pleaded guilty and served 2 years of a 5-year prison sentence at the Wisconsin State Penitentiary in Waupun. The second-degree murder charge of which Wilson was convicted Tuesday carries a penalty of 5 years to 7 years in prison. Ginkowski said he will ask for a very substantial sentence for Wilson. Breitenbach set sentencing for February 25. The trial of Wilson resulted from an independent investigation in 1985 by David Cole, news director of radio station Lippin Kenosha. Cole started the investigation after Donald's 4 sisters had told him they had been unable to get authorities to listen to their story about the death of their brother for more than 10 years. Donald's oldest sister, Pamela Miller, 27, sat in the courtroom clutching hands with 2 of her sisters as the jury returned its verdict. Breaking into tears, Miller said, "We wanted the truth for our brother and we got it. You know, I had a dream last night that Mr. Wilson was found guilty and got 15 years, and I got kicked out of the courtroom for cheering. I've waited a long time to be relieved and now I am relieved. My brother can go to heaven now." Miller was in the courtroom with her sisters, Joan Flatley, Dawn Stewart and Susan Antrim. Wilson's son and 3 daughters by an earlier marriage, as well as his first wife, sat in the front row of the courtroom. They showed no emotion when the verdict was read. His son, David Jr., said the family did not wish to comment on the verdict. When all was said and done, Miller's stepfather was sentenced to 16 years in prison. 12. Reporter finds missing boy while talking into camera about missing boy. For this reporter, being at the right place at the right time meant relieving a worried family of their worst fears. Paul Fagan, of Tampa, Florida, was reported missing from his grandmother's house last week, WFLA reported. The 10-year-old had been missing for more than half a day, when reporter Cameron Palm and his cameraman were in the boy's neighborhood to report on his disappearance, according to ABC Action News. While on the job, the reporter spotted a tired-looking child who matched Paul's description wandering about in a nearby yard. "He's looking at me and I'm thinking, could this possibly be this kid? Is this really happening?" Palm told Today.com. "It was a very surreal moment." Palm immediately took the child to law enforcement officials, who returned the boy to his family. The 10-year-old, who went missing around 4 p.m. on Thursday, told the reporter that he had left his grandmother's house to get some alone time, away from his little brother, Today.com reported. Paul, who is under his grandmother's custody, spent some of the time he was missing at a neighbor's backyard taking a nap. When Palm saw the boy around 7 a.m. the next day, Paul was in good condition and unharmed, only a bit scared he would be scolded. "When I saw him, he looked not only tired, but he looked scared he might be in trouble. He's 10 years old and he's a smart kid. He knew he was in a little bit of trouble for what he had done," Palm told Today.com. Paul didn't have much to worry about as his family was overjoyed to see him, hugging the boy the moment they were reunited with him, according to ABC. In what might be the shortest mystery ever, Cameron Palm, a reporter for WFTS in Florida, was covering the disappearance of Paulus Kilfagan, when he saw the young boy in his neighbor's backyard looking tired, dirty, and hungry. Palm was cool about solving the case, saying, "I was just in the right place at the right time. I wasn't out there all night looking for him like the deputies were. Those guys did all the work. I just happened to be there at the right time." 13. The Mystery of BoShek. When Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker enter the Mos Eisley Cantina for a transport to the Aldrin system, Han Solo was not the first pilot they talked to. A brief scene depicts Obi-Wan talking to someone else, seemingly asking for a ride to the planet. This man, for reasons unknown, turns down the job offer, and sets Kenobi up with Chewbacca. The rest, as they say, is galactic history, a fateful meeting between a Corellian smuggler and a Jedi in training that would shift the future of the universe, unbeknownst to them. He's on screen for less than a minute, but the pilot Obi-Wan first talks to, identified as BoShek, and has still become a big part of Star Wars lore. Like so many other minor characters in a galaxy far, far away, he was turned into an action figure, allowing fans to play out the intriguing what-if scenario, where Obi-Wan and Luke never meet Han. Oddly enough, however, the actor who played BoShek in A New Hope has never been revealed. That piece of the Star Wars puzzle troubled true crime journalist Bill Jensen, who took it upon himself to uncover the name of the uncredited thespian. In a post on his website, Jensen shared the story of how he became involved with this particular case. His interest was piqued while attending the Secrets of Mos Eisley Cantina panel at the Anaheim Convention Center during Star Wars Celebration 2015, hosted by Tom Spina and Pablo Hidalgo. The two presenters have very strong ties to the franchise. Spina rebuilt the cantina setup for a Volkswagen commercial, and Hidalgo is the creative executive at Lucasfilm, and a member of the famed Lucasfilm Story Group that oversees Star Wars canon. Jensen was surprised to discover that neither man knew the actor behind BoShek. According to Jensen, at that moment he found his sense of purpose in the Star Wars universe, and embarked on a mission to find the actor. He began by contacting Spina, asking for clues, but they were hard to come by. The only lead available was a screenshot from the UK television series The New Avengers, where the BoShek actor played another uncredited role. Spina also sent Jensen some production notes, which included names of the actors involved with that particular episode. Part 1 of K is for Kill, The Tiger Awakens. Jensen took this information and reached out to various casting directors, actors, and collectors he thought would know the answers. He started threads on message boards asking about BoShek, and even sent emails to relatives of the actors listed on the production notes. Nothing turned up until February 8, 2016. That morning, Jensen received an email from a man named Barry Gregory, who stated that his grandfather was the one who played BoShek. Quickly emailing Gregory back, Jensen was put in contact with Gregory's mother, Sylvia Holt, who confirmed Gregory's claim. Francis Alfred Basil Tomlin portrayed BoShek in the original Star Wars film, and was also a stormtrooper. After nearly 40 years, one of the biggest Star Wars mysteries has finally been solved thanks to the curiosity of one intrepid reporter. Unfortunately, Tomlin passed away more than 11 years ago, so he'll never know of the efforts Jensen went through to uncover his identity. However, the revelation is a nice moment for Tomlin's family, who are trying to get his name put on the credits so Tomlin receives the recognition he deserves. Jensen has followed up with Spina and is working on a way to make sure Tomlin's place in Star Wars history is honored. How that's accomplished remains to be seen, but Jensen's work should go a long way in making something happen in the not-too-distant future.